Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the third IS-BAO Progressive Stage 3 Roundtable. I'm Catherine Hilst. I am the IS-BAO Operations Manager, and IBAC, the IS-BAO, and the IS-BAO programs are leading providers of international safety standards for business aviation. Before we get started, I do have just a few housekeeping items to cover. All of the attendees are on mute because of the number of folks we have in the audience. However, there should be in your GoToWebinar control panel a questions section. So please feel free to put in any questions or comments that you might have during the course of this discussion today, and we'll address those when we get to the end of the discussion towards the end of the hour. What I would like to do now is introduce briefly our new IS-BAO Program Director, Andrew Karras, and he's got a short welcome.
Hi, hey, thank you, Catherine. Hey, very happy to be part of this IS-BAO team and this Progressive Stage 3 Roundtable. The Progressive Stage 3 program is growing, and we are excited to continue these roundtable sessions where we focus on safety topics relevant to the global business aviation industry. I look forward to meeting you all in person. I know that's coming soon. I'll hand it back to Catherine. Thank you again for joining us today, and I'll have Catherine introduce today's panel. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew, and welcome aboard. We love having you. Okay, so our panel includes awesome members of our IS-BAO Progressive Stage 3 leadership team. They have all been here since before the beginning of the program. And today their discussion is going to be focusing on managing change now more than ever as the business aviation world moves forward through the effects of the pandemic. So they're going to talk about coping with and managing rapidly changing dynamics in our global industry, and some topics about the post-COVID surge in activity. I am very pleased to introduce our panel members. Gary Dietz is the chief pilot of a major U.S. telecommunications flight department. Jad Donaldson, the director of aviation and chief pilot for the Harley-Davidson Motor Company. Mark McIntyre, Director, Flight Ops for Mente LAC, and Blair Robson, Manager of Aircraft Maintenance and Aviation Facilities for a large Texas-based flight department. Thank you all so much for being here today. I am just very much looking forward to this discussion. What we have in this brave new world of ours is that normal operations appear to be a thing of the past for most of us, and business aviation is rapidly changing, and that has amplified the need to have processes in place for managing our post-COVID, our pandemic world. And it would appear that getting back to normal, as we might have conceived it, never really happened. So with that, I would like to start this conversation with our first topic, which is the state of the business aviation industry. As the world has opened up from the pandemic, it looks like things are getting quite busy in business aviation. So the question here is, what has been your experience with expansion, increase, decrease in activity, and the status of new entrants and perhaps first timers in the business? And I think we're going to start with Mark McIntyre today, and then it's off we go.
Well, thanks, Catherine, and good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you may be. So I'll just give you a little background on our operation. Pre-COVID, we operate 2 long-range Gulfstream jets, and most of our flying was in the international arena, so about 70%, and most of that to the developing world. During COVID, that was severely cut back. We are now back to, I would say, pre-pandemic levels of flying. Not to our normal destinations, but a lot of domestic flying and flying throughout North America, the Caribbean, and Western Europe. And I'd say that the challenges that we're facing at the moment are challenges, I think, brought on by what I'm seeing is a huge increase in the use of business aviation aircraft. So I think we've all read about, the sales of both new and used aircraft, pilot hiring opportunities. So, that indicates to me that there's just a lot of activity, and I think that's been confirmed by several of the vendors within our industry that track, especially business aviation flight activity. So what we're seeing are issues with aircraft parking, both domestic and international, especially at popular destinations, we're wrestling with the need for COVID testing, often required every time you arrive in a new country, and then the associated online health questionnaires. There's just, it seems like there's a lot of spinning of wheels. We recently completed a trip through Mexico, the Caribbean, and Europe, and it seemed like each country wanted their own set of health questionnaires that took a fair amount of time to complete. And when we arrived at the destination, they weren't even asked for. So it just appears to me, at least our experience, that there's just a lot of kind of wheel spinning going on, a lot of work being done that then doesn't really, it appears in the aftermath that it didn't need to be done, but in the planning process, we try to be thorough and we don't want to arrive at a destination without a document that we need for entry. So a little frustrating, but we're just kind of working through it. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
All right. Others on the panel, sorry. What are your experiences these days?
Catherine, Jad here with Harley Davidson. We're experiencing the same thing. I think Mark articulated it correctly. The international piece, and we haven't done any international. We've pivoted the flight department to pure domestic, not because we really wanted to, but because COVID kind of has limited us with the Challenger 300 we operate. So, until we had Canada really opened up and we could work that, international European operations were certainly not really part of the equation. And we pivoted now to supporting our manufacturing facilities at a higher level than we probably ever have. Our flying has changed. I think it's easy to say now that we're not getting back to the normal. We're figuring out what the new normal is going to look like in our industry, and we're all, at least at our experience, we're all staying very busy, and we're dealing with having to, as Mark pointed out, prepare for the unknown, both internationally and domestically. International travel from my colleagues that are in the industry that are going, to Mark's point, are just running into a lot of roadblocks and a lot of checking the box to make sure you have everything, not always being asked to prove it once you do all the work, but there's just a lot of unknown work and work that you have to figure out, and it's become very challenging. Domestically, we're seeing some amazing things happening that I've, in 40 years of flying airplanes, had never experienced before. When COVID hit, we ran into a lot of the issues with ATC zero events and other things. Now we're dealing with airspace that's getting quite congested, and air traffic controllers that are really struggling to find ways to make it all work. The command center out of Washington is constantly sending us updates. The East Coast is getting slammed. Teterboro is becoming an airport that is very hard to operate in and out of. And I think from an industry standpoint, we're going to need to have some come to Jesus time to sort out how to keep that airport viable for us, because anybody operating out of the New York Metroplex is, going to run into some major issues with that. And so, I'm seeing a lot of those issues that are beginning to happen across the spectrum. In addition, I'll give my one nugget to the entire audience today, and thank you all for joining us. The word of the day, I made a joke about this for those of you that knew the moving Trading Places. It was all about pork bellies. In aviation, it's going to be all about tires. So if you have tires or can get tires, if I were you, I'd find a way to make sure your airplane has spare tires, because we have a set of wheels that are in for new rubber, and right now they're telling us it'll be 9 months before we see those get mounted. So tires are a thing, and I never thought we would be saying that, but we in the aviation industry are experiencing supply chain issues around some of the tire shortages that are coming out that we're starting to hear across all the platforms, not just in the Challenger fleet. So be mindful of that if you're not already prepared for it, because you could have a grounding event on your airplane for many, many months. With that, let me send it over to Gary and get his perspective on this.
Well, Jed, I heard this just the other day too from our maintenance support team, is the key word tires, the limited supply. I meant, like, who would have thought that? So again, a timely discussion, what is the new normal? And things that we were planning on beforehand or never thought of before COVID, now all of a sudden we have a whole new set of challenges. So one of the things that I wrote down listening to the current discussion is additional administrative responsibilities and research. One of the things that we implemented, let me get back to the original question. Our flying is still not there. We've had a few limited international trips, not a whole lot. Our domestic travel is starting to grow a little bit. But you're right, we have some challenging destinations, and we're here at Love Field, which presents a challenge in itself. And I'm going to put a plug in for the NBAA help desk and international service providers, in the fact that we live here in the North Texas area, we live in an area of edicts. We're constantly getting a new departure times, and if it wasn't for the relationship we have with the NBAA help desk, who's there right next to the ATC command center in Washington, D.C., we would experience some lengthy delays. But so far, knock on wood, our longest delay has maybe been 20, 25 minutes. But there again, it's about knowing your resources. And so regardless if it's a time slot or tires, it's maintaining that good relationship with a vendor. The other thing I wrote down too, Jad, that we're experiencing is, of all crazy things, we get our fair internal audits from the finance department. Obviously, we should be held accountable, but we're experiencing larger hotel costs and meals. I mean, inflation is pushing those numbers higher, that we're going back and reevaluating our budget expenses for 2022 and 2023 already. And that's an additional little item that we've got to plan for, 20, 30% increases there. So that's kind of my quick recap. Blair, what do you got? How are you doing with tires, Blair? Got some?
Well, that's appreciate the Jad. Appreciate the what's up on tires. Luckily, we always keep a lot. But believe me, after this meeting today, I'm going downstairs and talk about tires of all things. But going back to our flight department is getting back to normal, but it's just not. It's a different new normal. Our flight hours aren't anywhere close to 19. We recently sold one of our aircraft based down in Houston, a G280. And that's an interesting market too. The used aircraft market is extremely hot right now. The airplane sold quickly, got some good money for it, very good money for it. So as far as used airplanes, the market is just as tight. I'm also a part of the maintenance directors roundtable. In fact, we're meeting today as well. And it's very interesting that everybody's dealing with hopefully getting more people, new airplanes. So the market, it looks like it's for some folks or some flight departments doing well. They have new airplanes on order. They're getting new airplanes. They're selling airplanes. So that's very encouraging for that. Some of us are experiencing loss in manpower because of it, either as I learned this morning from the other meeting, people are losing because of COVID mandates and who wants to get a vaccination or not. And for us, we've lost some folks for other reasons, as the airlines have been poaching our pilots quite heavily, and they've been somewhat successful with that. So that's a very interesting dynamic for us to lose pilots to the airlines. That's something that's new and different than the whole time I've been here, well over 20 years. So for us on the maintenance side, it's challenging because we've lost some folks due to retirement, not allowed to hire back yet until the flight times come back. So it's an interesting dynamic. We have to push ourselves, do more with less until you can't do more with less, and then you get to hire some folks. So it's a very interesting dynamic. You want to stay safe. You want to keep your airplanes maintained to the utmost degree, but they are definitely a trying time on the maintenance side. And again, supply issues are always playing into that as well.
Yeah, Blair, we're kind of experiencing the same thing as well. Um, I, Attrition is part of the experience that all of us have. Um, no doubt, every one of us, we do our best to try and retain the right employees, but it comes down to a life decision or a personal choice. But we have some opportunities to add some individuals in our department, but I've kind of put it on hold for the simple reason we're in the process of doing some compensation reviews, as well as, how do we stand amongst our peers? Because it's important that we bring in the right people at the right salary, at the same time respecting the individuals that are here. And so we should finish that research, evaluation, whatever you want to call it, here in the next couple of weeks. And I'll continue, get the interview process started again. But same reason, we have a few out on long-term disability for the COVID reasons, or for the mandate reason, I should say. One individual went to the airlines. Again, that was a personal choice. So we have some challenges as we're gearing back up, that, as well as managing, like you said, the some deficiencies in the supply chain. So it's some of the discussions we had prior to, we're revisiting again. Are we taking care of the employee while we maintain value to the company? And do we have the right personnel and the right headcount to take care of our customers? New challenge.
And Gary, I would dovetail on that to say that yeah, we're getting ready to. I think we're only at the front end of this problem with staffing issues that are coming. Sidebar to this, and talking a bit more about the COVID requirements and whatnot. Something I hadn't thought about and experienced firsthand on the road recently. Took a trip to New York and ended up at the hotel restaurant for dinner. The state of New York and the state of California have gone to having to prove vaccinations with a vaccine card and an ID in order to go inside anywhere. New York is extremely serious about it. Watched a flight crew who obviously wasn't vaccinated, got denied access to the restaurant, and wasn't able to eat. And they were not at a hotel where there was restaurants nearby, and even if they had, they wouldn't have been able to eat. So they were left having to do alternative ways of getting meals, which, to me, that's going to become a bit of a bigger problem if this gets adopted more globally, and it's certainly globally, but then nationally as well. I mean, globally, you're not going to go anywhere without a COVID card because you're not going to get into the country. But then domestically, we're going to have states where you're not even going to go inside buildings, because if you can't prove it, and they're very serious about making you prove it. They were standing at the door and asking you for your proof of vaccination before you can walk in. Whether we all agree with it or not is not a discussion I'm willing to get into. It's a matter of what do we have to do to operate our business. And then taking it one step further, and then Mark, I'd love to hear from you on this. Gary, so I've been doing a little research with the airlines and heard some astonishing numbers coming out of what they're getting ready to plan for 2022. Delta's talking about 250 person classes per month starting in January. In fact, in talking to some of their leadership, they're not sure they have enough check airmen to do IOE once they get their new employees through the class. So there's a lot of stress downstream in the system in just trying to ramp up. And they have a target number of, I believe it's 5,000 new pilots by 24 online, in addition to what they currently have. And if we're feeling the pain right now on our side, because our pilots, especially in IS-BAO flight departments, are the cream of the crop for their picking. I mean, they're walking any one of our pilots right into their program right away. And if you're a believer as a pilot that there won't be some sort of turnaround in the future of the airline industry at a point where you would get furloughed or lose your job, it's going to be hard for us to compete on the long term if the pilot's looking at a 20-year play, and they believe there's not going to be a roll off as there has been historically in that market segment. then it's going to be an interesting time for all of us. Mark, what are you experiencing on your side?
Well, thanks, Chad. I will say we've had 2 pilots move on recently. Neither went to the airlines. One left to pursue an advanced educational degree, and the other left to take a position with a management company, lead pilot for a new client on a long-range jet. So we are concerned about the pressure from the airlines. I was on a webinar recently where Argus presented some pretty compelling data looking at average entry salary within business aviation at about 3 different levels, and how that then plays out versus what you would earn, say, over a 20 or 25-year career with the airlines. And, I think there are ways for us to compete, and not just on direct comp, but on culture, retention. As you said, it's easy to forget that there have been many cycles of layoffs, throughout the airline's history. And I think a lot of us wonder if the long-term airlines have ever been consistently profitable. I mean, their profitability seems to cycle up and down. So I don't have all the answers to it, but we are working hard to make sure that we provide, a culture that is, inclusive, that is transparent, that respects the individual. We're trying to create a greater ability to present kind of a menu of options. So, for example, in my case, my wife and I don't have children, an adoption benefit, a child care credit. Those things aren't really important to me, but they're important to a lot of our other team members. So what are things that we can offer individually that speak to individual needs, desires, wants? How do we do that? And again, I don't have all the answers, but working with our HR partners been really provocative in terms of how do we think through this, and how do we really think outside the box, and how do we create an ability to allow people to kind of pick from a menu of benefits that really support their family and their individual needs. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm very hopeful about it. And I think, for all of us, because we're not dealing maybe with 8 or 10 or 12,000 pilots, that we have the ability to really respect people as individuals and not just as a seniority number.
That's very important, Mark, and that's something that I was going to point out. Is I want to remind all of us here on the panel, as well as those out in the audience, we don't have to find 200 pilots a month. We just have to find that one.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it's an answer to the challenge that we're facing, but I advertised a couple positions. I received over 100 resumes in a matter of 5 days, and some good, many good solid candidates. An important thing that I discovered reviewing the resumes, a fair number were retired airline pilots, that the early retirement. Now, obviously, we want to encourage long-term continuous planning, AKA focusing on the younger generations. I mean, in our department, I have probably 4 different generations, from us baby boomers to Gen X, millennials to Gen Zers. But getting back to the airline pilots, depending upon the culture that they're looking, Mark, that's why culture is very important. Finding that just that one individual that can come in and enhance a culture or support, that's willing to work within the culture that we have, meaning it's not just flying the trip and then going home. It's the other ancillary duties we have. And I think it's fair to say, and I'm finding there are a lot of individuals out there that have a lot of runway left in their life, mm-hmm. that want to contribute from the bottom up in an organization. So not only encouraging the youth and those younger than us to take a look at our profession, but take a look at those individuals as well that have extensive years of experience, and bring them in and help have them lead from the bottom up. But that's why it's important that we have a good solid FOM, a good solid SOP, and that we have some good operational controls in place that maintains a high level of accountability on how well our crews follow that. And that goes back to a culture. And I'll put a plug in for Progressive Stage 3 real quick, okay? So we can make Andrew smile here for a second. We got it, okay? And that is, you know, we just finished up our second Progressive Stage 3 here just last week. And the thing that I'm finding enjoyable about it, or that I really appreciate about it, is that we're already planning on next year's audit. I mean, it truly is continuous improvement. And that's just in the safety culture. Well, if we take that same type of approach to what kind of discussion do we have with HR? Mark, you mentioned that. Having discussions with HR where we're focusing on three things. How do we take care of our employees? How do we provide value to the company? And how do we take care of our customers? And anytime that we can come up with an idea that fills those three areas, we're onto something. And that type of culture allows us to retain employees, or at least it comes down to a personal life choice for that individual. And that's kind of what I've been experiencing here lately with seeing the number of resumes. So,
You know, and Gary, you brought up bringing in retired airline pilots. You know, I don't think you can underestimate the value to the younger pilots you bring up. It almost gives you the ability to have a matrix on both sides, right? You end up with your airline experienced long-term aviator helping the new aviators coming up through your department, provided, of course, the cultural fit is there. The one thing I've noticed in my department is that the pilots who have come from the airlines really do an outstanding job at debunking the unknowns of what it's like to work for the airlines, and to talk candidly about what the differences are between the two different types of career paths, whether you're a career path in the airlines or a career path in business aviation. And they speak to it very well at that level. And I've seen that both on the pilot side, and I've seen it on the maintenance side as well, explaining to business aviation maintenance technicians what it's like to work in the commercial maintenance space, because it's very different than how we do it, and the way the cultural basis is and the ownership of it. Blair, would you agree with that on the maintenance side?
Uh-oh. Blair, I think
Yeah,
you're
I
muted.
have a little bit of lag. Sorry about that, but
No worries.
am I okay? All good?
Yes.
Okay. I want to kind of go back to the pilot. Retired pilots for this flight organization is not, if they're 65 or above, we do not leave anybody here 65 and above. So that pipeline, if you will, is not available for us. But it's interesting for us is that we're finding out with, you know, we're one of the few companies, or maybe a privileged company that still has a pension. And for the millennials, that's not as important as it used to be. The pot at the end of the rainbow is not a big deal as it used to be. So that's an interesting dynamic. I kind of put it, this whole supply-demand curve, and I heard a lot this morning from my other brethren, maintenance brethren, that a lot of folks are going back to their HR departments like you did, Gary, and say, look, supply-demand curves, and you know, simply stating we need to increase our salaries to be to get some good folks to work with us. It's going to be an interesting challenge for us directly. But I think I equate it to back in the day when you go to the grocery store and you buy a cereal box and it was huge for $5. Now you get a much smaller box for $5. And I think that's what's going to happen for folks that are not allowed to put salaries up, is you're going to get somebody that's a little bit less experienced, less technically inclined on either side of the fence. And you're just going to have to do a lot more training to get them up to speed. That's just my personal opinion of how it would work if we can increase salaries to get qualified people that we usually would attract. But as far as the maintenance side of the house, that's going to play into us as well. we've started some things a couple years back of actually, we have a tuition reimbursement program. We've actually sent a couple of our guys through A&P school on tuition reimbursement and basically a long road to being qualified aircraft maintenance technicians, send them to flight safety, make them master technicians, the whole deal. So we're homegrowning our folks so that one, we get loyalty, and two, they know us and we know them, and they have nice long careers in the flight department. So that's something that we've done on the maintenance side. Not so easily done on the pilot side, and I completely understand that. And that's why I think those HR discussions are extremely important for the folks on the operational side. And I kudos to Gary for making that happen for your folks.
Well, and it's more than just walking into HR saying, hey, we need more money. Data tells the story. So we participate in a number of surveys each year, usually in the spring and summer, get the results back in early fall and late in the fall. And we just finished the conversation. Vice President that I report to, he just finished the conversation with HR compensation. I'm waiting for the report back. But I'd like to get back to the airlines for a second and compliment the airlines on, because every one of us, in one form or another, we need the airlines. And another new challenge that we have is trying to plan schedules, either repositioning crews or getting crews back from training in time for the next trip. You almost have to plan an extra day or a contingency plan, because the schedules, the airlines, they're doing their best to try and fill the need. Everybody has been pent up for 18 months, a lot of traveling, just personal travel. We all do it, we all enjoy it. They're trying to meet that demand. Businesses are getting back out there. The airlines have a challenge, but how it affects us is you almost have to plan an extra day or two going to a training facility or returning or pre-positioning crews, whereas before you know, with 99.9% reliability, man, you could plan it almost to the hour. So that's another new challenge.
So Gary, to your point real quick, this is like spot on to what you're talking about. The other things the airline executives were telling me that they've pivoted to something they have not done in decades. So they're doing live seat commuting with all of their pilots and their crews, meaning they will throw a passenger off the airplane in order to get a crew member to where they need to go. Now, most of us all remember the days when the airlines would jump seat all their crews, and if the airplane was full, the crew ended up having to take another seat. And if you were in the airlines, you'd have to call dispatch and say, hey, I can't get on this flight, so on and so forth, and they'd start reworking the crew schedule. They don't have enough crews for the flights that they have, so now they're gonna start live seating the crews onto the aircraft and removing passengers in order to make sure their crews are getting where they're going for exactly the problem that you're talking about. And it's absolutely true. We're almost having to build in an extra day of travel in order to relocate. Mark, you guys are moving crews around, aren't you? I mean, you're probably experiencing a bit of that.
We do move crews around, both obviously for training and for crew positioning purposes. We haven't run into a problem yet, but we are careful about how we book, especially airline flights, when we reposition crews. And our policy is to reposition a crew if it involves a several time zone jump at least 48 hours in advance. So they arrive 48 hours at minimum before they would have a departure out of that destination. And in many cases, we're looking at 72 hours, or we're looking at a flight that if the flight were delayed or canceled, had a mechanical, whatever the case may be, weather delay, that we still have some cushion to work with. So to your point, yeah, we don't feel we can schedule as efficiently as we'd like to. We have to build in for the projected contingency. And if we could, I wouldn't mind going back to Blair's comment about the kind of growing from within and building kind of loyalty. I haven't experienced it, but in a lot of the reading I've done, it sounds like loyalty is not kind of not a component of the millennial generation. And so I guess I'd love to hear, Blair, from you, if growing and investing has paid off in terms of loyalty. People respect the investment you're making, and it is developing a level of loyalty that leads to retention.
Yes, I'll wait for my, there we go. Yes, I can tell you that the folks that we have done that with, they are definitely millennials. And I kind of have fun with that little word with them, but both of them are very appreciative of what we've done with them, of sending them to A&P school and then sending them to the full flight safety and making them master techs. So the company has invested a lot in them. They've invested a lot of their time and energy to get their certificates. But when you look at the mentors that we have, I'm 20 plus years, and I'm just one of many 20 plus, 30 plus year maintenance technicians here at our flight department. So they have a lot of good people watching over them. We of course don't let them work alone. We take care of them. But at the end of the day, if you keep telling them that you're the future of the flight department, and we've been around for almost 100 years, that we know that they feel good about themselves, and they know they work with good equipment and good people, and they know that there is a pot at the end of the rainbow. And as they get older, I think they'll appreciate all of that's come to them. And yeah, we feel very good about what we've done, and hopefully that sets a trend back to making sure that loyalty is key for every flight department. I think 30, 40 year plus, like Gary and other folks that are on the call, it means a lot. There's a lot of history, a lot of experience, and a lot of good professionalism that comes along with all that. So I feel very strong about that, and we're just going to keep doing that plan.
And Jad and Gary, obviously initial training for pilots is crazy expensive in many cases. Are you guys seeing any issues with loyalty or making investments in people that don't pay off in the long term?
I personally, not too many negative experiences in that. I'm pausing here for a second. I can't think of very many pilots where I have experienced that we have went to the expense of doing an initial and they've left within a year or two after that. There may be some out there over the history, but very few. It's usually year 4, 5, 6 that individuals may move on. But there again, some of them had a change of plans in their life career. And I appreciate that and I support that. So I'm going to kind of tie this part of the conversation back into the culture, AKA the progressive stage 3, AKA the continuous improvement, the continuous conversations. I mean, we have, it's a company requirement, but it's also a good practice. We have monthly one-on-ones with, I have that with my direct reports. They have it with their direct reports. So it's what are we doing well and what can we do better? So getting back to retention, when they're part of the solution and they feel like, well, not feel, and they can see that they're part of the solution, providing the answers, the guidance going forward, regardless if it's in a progressive stage 3 feedback forum or compensation, whatever it is, as long as they're being heard, they're being listened. And we do that through continuous conversations, which again, to use a repetitive phrase, continuous improvement. They're part of the solution. So I think that helps. But again, it still comes down, Mark, to individuals have changes in life. It becomes a life change, a life choice. We have a saying here that feedback is a gift as long as it's done respectful and through the right channels. And when individuals come in and say, hey, I've made this decision to go this direction, they provided some valuable feedback, but it was done respectfully. And it's kind of hard not to respect an individual that gives us that feedback and gives us a little more of the story on why they move on. But in the process, we learned something too.
I think, Gary, it also goes to, um, picking the right individuals. One of the things, probably to a fault, that I do is I'm pretty transparent with what things cost and what the expense of the flight department is to the company and what the value is that we add to the company on the other side of that equation. But when I talk to the individual pilot or maintenance technician, because I feel that we owe it to our maintenance technicians for them to be able to be the best as well and have advanced training and professional development equal to the pilots. But we talk a lot about the pilots because of the cost and expense of the training piece of it. My math shows that about 38 months I break even on buying a type rating on a super mid-sized type aircraft. And so if I can keep them through 38 months, I can at least break even on the expense that I have. And then, beyond that, I'm kind of in a good position. And to your point, Gary, you'll lose them at 4, 5, or 6 years for a multitude of reasons potentially. And then you'll have some that are going to stay for a career and a lifetime and just be really happy with the culture and what the job is. And if we've seen anything in the last 18 months, is that everything that we thought was the norm of how we do business has all changed. At least it has in what I've seen. Um, this is especially true in the field of training. I mean, I feel for our training partners, especially the big ones. I think we all better prepare ourselves for a 5 to 8% increase across the board in our training costs that are coming at us. They're struggling just like we are to retain talent. And it's almost like a pecking order that I find from what I hear. It's like the airlines come into our departments and steal somebody, and what do? We pick up the phone and call the latest greatest instructor that we had on the last recurrent and say, hey, would you love to come to Milwaukee? I haven't had to do that, thank God. But I think that a lot of us out there are doing that, and so they're trying to retain talent as well. And training has changed and is evolving. And Gary, I know you're working deeply on that in that space as well. And maybe I'll kick it back to Mark on this one. I mean, are you experiencing that? Two things that are happening. We'll pare it down. One is cost is going way up, and two, I can't get a slot, and it's hard to get slots anywhere. It seems like they are just. If you are planning to stand up a new platform or you need to send people in, you better get prepared for trying to figure out how to get that slotted, because right now they're going as fast as they can with the resources they have. Mark, are you seeing that?
We're not on the fixed wing side. Our chief pilot does a magnificent job of scheduling our training well in advance, and our schedule allows us to honor those training slots. So that seems to work out pretty well. I will say on the rotary wing side, we're adding a new piece of equipment later this year, and we've had one crew go through the initial training, and the second crew is going through it right now. And the training it's not being conducted very efficiently from my perspective. It's about a 12-day initial, but it doesn't run through the weekend. So you're in a remote city, with 2 down days that are essentially unproductive. You finish the initial, and then they send you home, and then you go back for the sim portion, a week or 2 weeks later, and that's another 10 days. And then they send you home, and then they bring you back a third time for a Part 142 check ride. It's not a type ride, but it's a check ride. So, 3 sets of round trip airline tickets, in and out of hotels, training that could be done probably in 30 days spread out over almost 2 months. So very disruptive to the schedule, pretty disruptive to the students' lives, or the pilots' lives. Now it is nice to kind of be home after a couple of weeks. I mean, some of the crews have enjoyed that, but it does mean then having to repack and go back to, school a second time. So I don't know if there's a perfect solution to that. but it's something that we're not used to seeing. I think most of us used to packing a bag, going to initial, spending the time, finishing up, and getting home.
I'm going to jump in here since I am the timekeeper. You guys are sailing through all of this, and in terms of time, and we've got a number of questions coming in. I know we had a topic for ATC challenges. You've touched on some of that, and I'm happy to keep this conversation there. But also, especially in the maintaining standards, how are you all adapting and being resilient in the world today? So just wanted to kind of give you a timing notice and carry this on into all of these changes and how you're adapting in your operations.
Blair, you
Well, I
want to
guess
take
I'll
that?
jump in.
Or Gary or Mark? I don't know.
I'll jump in just quickly. So one of the things we've seen is that we use flight attendants pretty regularly. We use them on all our international trips and about half of our domestic trips. And in COVID, there was a request that we not use flight attendants just as a means of removing one additional, contagion vector from the aircraft. And so that forced us to kind of look at how we would continue to deliver safety and services without having that third crew member on board. And we did it by developing some new checklists. Our aircraft have KA band, which allows the streaming of Netflix and Hulu and Spotify and all those other things. And in the cabin setup, that was a flight attendant duty, and it took about 30 minutes, assuming you didn't have any tech problems. And so we had to kind of put together a quick reference card for the pilots to allow them to set up that technology. We just recently have put a time limit on the time allowed to set that up because it was becoming a major distraction and really pulling pilots away from their primary duty. Nobody wanted to be the one standing in front of the client saying, hey, you're not going to have 3 of your 7 streaming services today. Everybody wanted everything working perfectly, but it meant that they were sacrificing other aspects of their job and really things that should be more safety focused. So we've looked really hard at that. We've had to go back and kind of revisit our standards and find ways to ensure that we can uphold our standards while asking the pilots to do more. So it's been an interesting process. It's been part of our change management process. We're not there yet, but we feel like we've made some good strides forward in that. But it is going back to Gary's mention of culture. We've really had to reassure the pilots that if the streaming services aren't working, if some aspect of cabin technology isn't working, no one is going to drag you across the coals. Your job is to get our clients safely and conveniently from point A to point B, and the rest of it is just icing on the cake. And if there's no icing on the cake, it'll be fine for today.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on safety. Oh, Blair, go ahead. Go ahead, Blair.
Sorry about that. I am getting a little bit of lag, but I'll do my best with that. About the maintaining standards, and again, we're down about 4 technicians, which is not a comfortable feeling for me and for my folks. But I always make sure that they understand that time pressures about getting an airplane out or anything like that is please do not worry about that. Do not worry about the money to maintain the airplane or about an easier way, let's say, to MEL it instead of taking care of it. We're going to do the best we can with what we have and maintain that flight schedule and never lose our standards. That's just not something that we even want to go to talk about. And the proof is always in the pudding for a maintenance department is when you sell an airplane. And I can't be more proud of my folks down there in Houston that we went through a G280 sale and we had 0 discrepancies on the pre-buy, and our buyer was rather excited to know that he's like, where's all the discrepancies? I'm sure there are some. We said, no, sir, there's not. And so that is always the proof in the pudding for me as a flight department that and especially in the maintenance department, that we're doing the right thing. We keep doing the right thing with less folks, but we keep our standards up and just keep them energized, and hopefully they understand that that goes a long way throughout the industry, that we're still doing what we can, less people, working harder, working some overtime, but at the same time taking care of business. And that's something that we just can never relax upon. I think that goes across the board in any flight department, whether it be the pilots or the maintenance, is that we keep our standards high. Continuous improvement, as Gary says, we probably put that on our foreheads, continuous improvement, right? But that's something that we always want to do. And it's just a new and different time. And that's the whole reason for this discussion today is how do we bob and weave? How do we adjust? How do we increase our availability to the customer with less airplanes, less people, but still show a shining example of a safe, secure, and easy, free life for them to get where they need to go.
Yeah, Mark, you brought up an interesting point that kind of like to dovetail into what Blair was saying and tied into what, Mark, what you were saying. How do we deliver that comfort level to our customers there in the back? You know, whether or not if it's reducing the number of head count or the interaction of the number of crew members. What we did 18 months ago, and we've went through several renditions of it, revisions of it. We created an executive summary, high-level executive summary, one pager. Here's what, how often the air is refreshed in the cabin of the aircraft, you know, every 2.5 minutes. Where do we get our air from? How is it purified? What do we do post-trip? What do we do prior to the trip? All crews, even though we have vaccine mandates in place, crews are still required to get COVID tested prior to 24 to 72 hours prior to a departure. We have really enhanced pre-departure briefings, which now includes the scheduling department, who participates in doing research for the crews as far as at least give us a little bit of an idea of what to expect at our destination. It was mentioned earlier about going into New York and knowing the local mandates, and we have to tie that into where do we get our catering from? What do we do? Do we bring in our own catering for the crew meals, whatever it may be? So there's a lot of things that we have to do different now, but we also found in the process of doing these pre-departure briefings, we're actually having better communication. I meant, what a shock, right? Better communication amongst all the departments, from scheduling to maintenance to crews, pilots, flight attendants. Everybody is better aware of what the expectations are and what you're going to experience. And as the end result, I feel our customers, aka the passengers in the back, they're reassured that here's the processes that we're doing to take care of you. Not only landings equal takeoffs. If you take off 100 pieces, we put 100 pieces back on the aircraft, but it's also the extra things that we're doing, the extra steps we're doing in providing customer safety to enhance that customer experience.
Catherine, I think you're muted.
Good. I was going to say that awesome. I don't want to completely stop the conversation. We could stay here all day. So I just any thoughts, further thoughts on the maintaining standards before we turn to the questions?
Let's hit some
Well,
questions.
I can't emphasize enough the standards, the SOPs that each and every one of us have in place, and we determine what's best for us and for operations and with the environments we have to work in. But that's our North Star. Our FOM and our SOPs, those are our North Star. Those are the expectations. Communicating, removing assumptions allows us to deliver a safe environment as we deal with all these other challenges. Because at the end of the day, it's all about having happy customers in the back. and making sure that they know we're there for them. They know that. They can see that through our dedicated efforts every day. But to know that we're going the extra mile, not that we want to brag on what we're doing or anything like that, but they, as officers of the company or the customers in the back, they know that we got it. They can focus on their business. They can focus on their travel, pleasure, whatever it may be. We're going to be there to take care of them. But it comes down to having a solid SOP in place and having the crews buy into that. Can't stress that enough. What questions you got for us, Catherine?
One is a comment saying, "I'm glad to know we're not the only ones seeing these challenges." So that's right. I
You're
think
not alone.
you're not alone. No, exactly. So with that, there's a couple of things related to some of the attrition you guys talked about. Just saying that sometimes HR business partners are slow to respond to urgency, and that can be, I think the term here is glacial. But how do you translate safety impacts and the respective costs of waiting to address attrition until whoever they are that are making the decisions say it's time to reopen and bring people back in?
Well, that is a challenge. And again, I'll repeat myself. It's just we have continuous conversations with our crew members in retention. It's important that we develop a relationship based upon trust and respect with our counterparts in HR and legal, but primarily HR. And here's what we're seeing. What are you experiencing throughout the rest of the company? What do you hear in other HR departments? And try to get them involved in the solution and just saying, here's a problem, fix it.
Yeah, HR, to jump in, Gary, HR tries to fit a square peg into a round hole when it comes to aviation in the business. By and large, they're focused on how the business operates and the HR requirements to running the business, and it almost never translates to aviation. And when they try to translate it into aviation, it becomes really, really tricky. I experienced this firsthand with there was going to be a massive reorg that was going to happen. It was going to affect the flight department as well. There was going to be a loss of one aircraft. And I said, you need to tear the Band-Aid off with the aviation department. If we're going to state that we're going to remove an airplane, then we're going to downsize staff, then we need to downsize staff immediately. And I was flatly denied. The HR team was like, nope, they're not any different than anybody else. We're going to notify them. I said, oh no, they're a lot different than everybody else. They have their hands on the controls of the airplane, and I need everybody's headspace in the right place and not arguing with each other over who might or may not still be standing at the end of the day, and have that lead to a safety problem that could lead to a catastrophic event or an incident. HR would not listen to me. They would not have anything to do with it. I was left having to put my foot down and say, okay, we're going to stop flying. When you make the announcement, we'll start flying again, because I'm not going to put us in a situation where this could become a serious safety issue. And that's not to say, I actually had an HR person turn around and say, these are professional people. They know how to sort it out between, what they're doing on the job. And I don't, distraction is a very minor, nuancy thing that happens, and it builds up over time, and it can happen within the confines of a flight. And one thing leads to another, and we all understand the links in the chain of events that can start to occur that can lead to disaster. And something as simple, or if you're the one impacted, it isn't simple, it's personal. If you're the one who's losing your job, it's a very personal thing. And and if you're worried about losing your job, it's a very personal thing. And putting those people, you want happy, to your point, Gary, you want happy people dedicated to doing a great job all the time, and you can't let anything get in the way of that.
Right. And we mentioned it earlier in the conversation, data tells a story. There's a lot of good resources out there industry-wide in the aviation and HR world. And getting the right HR person connected with the right surveys that are out there. Without naming the surveys that we participate in, there's 3 surveys that we definitely participate in each and every year, to where we work with HR on those. So as far as trying to be more proactive, I meant there's a little reactive portion to it, because the data is about 6 months to 12 months behind. But when it goes back to developing that relationship with them and focusing on the data and let the data tell the story, and how do we compare with our peers. And the other thing, that I heard you just say too, is you're focusing on what you can control. And what you can control is that situation. It's not any different on a no or no-go decision when there's a thunderstorm at the end of the runway, or enveloping the airport that you're trying to get into, or in Blair's environment where somebody has worked in a 12, 14-hour shift, and you got a new challenge to where, gosh, this new work order is going to take another 6, 8 hours. No, we need certain stops in place. We focus on what we can control, to where, no, we can't do that. I mean, what are they going to make us do? Retire? But it's all about delivering that.
Yeah, I would
Having the landings and the takeoffs.
see if I can. Let me kind of add a little bit to that. It's interesting for this very large company that we work for, that we've gone almost 2 years without a salary increase, and of course a hiring freeze on top of that. It's hard to that's why we've lost some folks because of that, and with no pure communication on when all of that's going to come back. And then of course the selling of an airplane without a replacement, a lot of negatives. How do you make all of that a positive? All we can do is just increase our flying, and then hopefully our folks in the executive committee can see that we need some more folks to meet the flight demand, to keep the maintenance demand, and hopefully as the company does better, we'll do better. But there has to be a different change, as much as we've all discussed today, is flight departments are different, have a different set of demands, have a different set of structures. And as much as they try to lump us into that other hole of engineering or professional folks, it just isn't the same thing.
No, you're right, Blair. And there's 4 of us on the panel here. So there's, all of us have, each one of us, I know the department you work in, it'd be an honor to work with any one of you in your respective departments. But each one of us, we have our own personal best practices. We have certain challenges within our various companies, as far as the perceptions from HR. And getting back to salaries and things, I remind both our flight crews and the vice president that I report to, he does a fantastic job of reminding the HR team. A lot of salary structures in the ivory tower are set up for doing well and getting promoted. But in our various departments, the opportunities for promotion isn't as great as it might be in the business world. So we have to focus on other things, on how do we take care of the employees. And I'd be silly to say it's not all about the money. Money is very important, but that's just one aspect. It goes back to our culture, goes back to the communication, both up and down. It's important to let the crews, to let the team know, here's where we're at. One of the things that we're experiencing during the past 18 months is evaluating our fleet. And now may be a good time to consider fleet modernization, because airplanes are in demand. You can almost react too late, especially if new airplanes are sitting on the line, on the assembly line, and they can't get tires, right? So it's like, you got to think about all these things. So, and what is one person's challenge is another person's opportunity. So there again, gosh, it's important to talk to one another, to see a lot of connections between those of us on this panel, but I'm sure there's many others out there that have the same challenges. Catherine, you mentioned that. It's good to hear that we all have the same challenges. But again, we all have, each one of us have our own unique set of situations that, Blair, I wish I could help you out. Wish I had a tire for you, whatever it may be. So we're not alone, but on sometimes we are, and it's nice to have a sounding board.
Yeah.
So I'm here for you guys and gals.
You guys are awesome. I have to say that of the questions that are left here, you've already sort of wandered through most of them in terms of what are you doing to retain people? How do you attract younger talent? What are the issues related to the various types of people who are applying for your positions? How do you lure them from going to the airlines? There's one question here. Oh, and then a comment about millennials, that maybe the pot at the end of the rainbow is not such a doesn't have the allure it might once have had. So I think in terms of the questions that we have, most of this has been addressed by what you've been talking about. There is an interesting one here that is, I think we'll just make the last one, is schedulers. Are you all seeing a move towards schedulers wanting to work remotely in this new day and age, right? Pilots obviously have to move. You've got to go somewhere. You can't just stay home and fly the aircraft, at least not yet. But is that an issue that you're seeing?
I'll jump on that one. It's not an issue. It's actually, and I'll be the first one to admit, I had to change my way of thinking. I love the personal dialogue, the interaction, stopping by somebody's desk or office and saying, hey, how are we doing on this or that? But certain individuals within our department are identified as flex, meaning you can work from home. So the schedulers are asked to have some in hangar time, but they're also given an opportunity to flex schedule from home. Let's face it, with the technology that we have available to us, a lot of things can be performed, a lot of duties can be accomplished wherever you're at. So I had to change my way of thinking. Again, it's the new normal.
Right.
Yeah, and if you don't want to lose them, you're going to want to stay flexible with them, because there's a lot of, I try to have a very open dialogue with everybody I work with, and to the point of saying, if you're looking for a job, you're unhappy with what we're providing, please just let me know you're doing that. If I can fix it, great. If I can't, I'll be the first one to write you a letter of recommendation, and we can, we'll figure it out. It'll all work out. But yeah, my dispatcher has been actively recruited for remote position as a dispatcher across the entire United States for companies, for big and small companies. So dispatchers are in demand, and they can work hybrid. Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say we have 3 schedulers, and our company in the early days of COVID pushed everybody who could work from home to work from home. And that's been our mantra for a year and a half. We are now pushing for a return to office on a limited basis, and we're phasing that in through the remainder of this year and into early next year. We found that our schedulers can work extremely well from home. Technology allows that, but we've also identified that throughout the organization, working from home, we've lost the water cooler conversations, right? We've lost the easy, quick conversations in the hallway. We've lost that collaboration, and to some degree, the innovation that comes with that. So I think there's a happy balance in there. We will require our schedulers to come into the office beginning early next year, 3 days a week, but they can have their choice of days. And if there are extenuating circumstances, I think we'll be flexible around that. But we're trying to find that balance between being together, collaborating together, and allowing the flexibility that people need to care for their family, for young kids, whatever the challenge might be.
Yeah, that kind of aligns with what we're doing, Mark. Catherine, I know our time's wrapping up. One more idea I'm going to throw out there is the power of what. Somebody taught me this years ago, the power of what. When individuals come into my office and they want to talk about their lifestyle, whatever it may be, and they ask me, do I value them as an employee? I turn it around and I ask, what's important is, what do you feel? What do I need to do to allow you to feel that you're valued, you're appreciated, and that you're being listened to? What do I need to do? And just let them talk and listen. And I think that allows all of us to handle challenges that are always coming up, whether or not if it's a new COVID variant, who knows what, who knows? But what do I need to do? I'll leave it, my 2 cents right there.
Awesome. Finding the balance, you all are just brilliant at working through what was the bobbin weaving through this sort of odd time. It's not normal, it's not new normal, it just is. And we so appreciate you all sharing your experience and talking about this. I could sit here and listen to you all day, but I know everybody has lives that they need to get onto. So I appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you for being here. To our attendees, thank you so much for being here. We will be doing these again in the new year, and you can keep track of that on the IBAC website under webinars. Thank you, Andrew, for hanging out with us today and for the questions from everyone. And we will see you all soon. Fly safe and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
There we go.